This time we take a summer ride out to Whittington Castle. Well, I can't escape enemies' attention. The weather's been rather nice in England of late. An ideal riding weather. And not want to spend an opportunity, we of course head out whenever we can. And this time we're heading out to the English-Welsh border, and more specifically to the small town of Whittington. This is just a few miles away from Oswestry and has its very own castle, which for our American viewers is kind of like a fort, but made of stone and quite a bit older. All three of us are riding today. I've taken the V7 for no other reason than I just can't be bothered to pull my own bike out because it's at the back of the garage. Tom is of course on his trusted Ducati, and Deb's taking a Honda, her absolute favourite bike ever.
It's not in neutral, no. Also, there's like a battery on neutral this thing.
Can't see.
No, it's not in neutral. Like, get off, I'll do it in there.
You can do it when you pull off. Look.
It's in neutral.
It's in
Yeah, they're not very open to do anyway, because I thought if ever sold them got you with the V50, they
Just regret it. Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, it was a good decision at the time, and then after I'd be like,
I was never sure it was a good decision at the time, but Whittington Castle is quite a small fortification, standing close to the historic fort town of Old Oswestry, because in the Middle Ages this had effectively been like a DMZ, a borderland between two countries constantly at war. The site was initially constructed as a traditional motte and bailey castle, but in the 13th century this was replaced by one with buildings around the courtyard, whose exterior wall was a curtain wall, and an inner bailey. Whittington Castle lies on the English side of Offa's Dyke, which is of course a famous earthwork which here forms the Norman boundary between Norman England and Wales. It's likely that the house actually began life as a manor house just after the Norman conquests, but in 1138 the site was fortified by William Peveril, who was acting in support of the Empress Matilda, who was a claimant for the English throne against King Stephen, and this has resulted in a fairly brief civil war between the two claimants for the English crown, in a period which is often referred to as the Anarchy.
I said, like, because the captain said, oh, you just need to look after your own patients, I said.
In 1149 the lordship of Oswestry and of course nearby Whittington was annexed by Madog ap Merdud and became part of the Kingdom of Paris, at least until Madog's death in 1160. In 1165, Henry II conferred the castle onto Roger de Paris, who gave funds for the repair of the castle in 1173. Roger would be succeeded by his son Murag, or Maurice, to give him his more English sounding name, who was then succeeded by his son Wenoroch. A rival claim from Fulk III of Fitzwarren, who was a rival descendant of the Peverils, was not actually recognised until 1204, leading him to rebel against King John. That's right, that King John, the one in the Robin Hood stories. Although of course in the time that the Robin Hood tales are set, he is only a prince, although he's not very popular, so this time art does imitate life.
See it?
Where? Oh right, I see on the lake there. There's a pond. And while all these minor family feuds may seem more like a plot from Dallas than Game of Thrones, this castle did see some military action in its time, although thankfully for all concerned no dragons were involved. In 1223, Llywelyn ap Laweth laid siege to the castle and captured it, although it would later be returned in a peace treaty, and the castle was completely rebuilt in stone and its layout was changed completely. And so the rebuilt castle would remain in English hands for all of 40 years, when it was ceded to Llywelyn ap Gruffydd as part of a peace treaty. In the mid to late 1350s, the castle went through a long period where it was being run by absentee landlords, many of whom were underage, so very little repair work was done, although some modifications were carried out. But this wasn't until 1402, just 2 years before Owen Glendower would lay waste to the entire region, although the castle itself was not actually captured. In the Elizabethan period, John Bouchier, who was 2nd Earl of Bath, exchanged the lordship of the castle in 1545 with Henry VIII. He did this in exchange for some monastic estates near his home in Devon. At the time of the exchange, a detailed survey was made of the structure, and it found the buildings to be in somewhat of a state of decay. And after this, it's very likely the castle was never actually inhabited for any length of time again, and was allowed to slowly crumble. The castle played no part at all in the English Civil War, being in too poor a state to be used as a fortification by that time. And so the castle was allowed to quietly crumble. Some stones were robbed out for local construction, and in around 1760 one of the towers collapsed into the moat. And so it became what the rich folk of the 1700s like to call a romantic ruin. In 1808, one William Lloyd undertook a restoration of the castle, but mainly the gatehouse, which he let out as a farmhouse. And in fact this would be continued to use as a house right up until the 1990s. Since 2002, the house has been run on a 99-year lease by the Whittington Castle Preservation Trust. This is a rural community formed in 1998, and the Trust recently completed a £1.5 million renovation of the site. And like most castles, it has its own share of ghosts and legends, one of which involves the Holy Grail, and no, Monty Python did not film anything here. But on the dramatic side, it is used by Norman reenactors every year to stage battles, which would have been fought in the site around that period. A visit to Whittington Castle makes for a very relaxing day out. It doesn't actually cost anything to enter the castle, there is a nice coffee shop and you don't have to pay for parking. All the profits from these of course go towards the upkeep of the castle itself. So if you want to help out for the continuing upkeep of the castle, why not pay a visit and enjoy a very fine coffee in that coffee shop. And for any vegans out there, they do have milk alternatives. So after a very nice visit to the castle, we made our way home through some very good weather. It really is very nice in England at the moment. That said though, my advice would be make sure you get out there, because let's face it, this is England and it's not going to last, is it? If you have any suggestions for places you'd like to visit this summer, just drop us a line below. Maybe we'll check them out. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.